We are live. So, hello everybody. I'm RT Bear, comic book professional with over 30 years of comic book experience. I've worked for both Marvel and DC on titles such as Spider-Man, Batman, X-Men, Fantastic Four, you name it. I've probably worked on it. And with me, as always, is the talented and lovely Taylor Grasso. Say hi.
Hi, are we actually on the air?
I don't
Because
think
it
so.
says it says off air in the corner. Oh, we're live. We are.
No,
Okay.
it says live in the corner here.
Okay, sorry, it took me a minute. Hi, everybody. I'll be reading your chat today. So if you have any questions for Art or the special guest here, I will ask them on your behalf.
Okay, and the special guest today is the great and very talented, he's a friend, very talented inker and artist, Walden Wong. So, hey, Walden, say hi.
Hello, how's everyone? Thanks for having me on board. Thanks for
Oh,
having me on your show.
oh, no
Al
problem.
Everyone's excited. Aaron says, "Wow, nice to have Walden Wong here."
Yeah,
I,
I mean, this is amazing. Okay, so it's going to get a little clumsy here because we got to figure out the rhythm. So what I'm going to do, Walden, is just do kind of a long form interview, and we'll go
okay.
over your entire career, and just in case people don't know who you are, which I don't know who or how they would not know who you are. You've done so much work in the past, and then we'll just kind of take it from there, how we know each other, and all the other good stuff. So without further ado, let's let Walden tell his story, how you broke in the business.
Okay, so before I started working in comics, I used to shop in this comic book store in San Francisco. The comic book store was called Ogleos, Ogleos. And in the store, there was this guy who would ring me up. So for a long time, I would just buy comics from him, the guy who would just ring me up. After a while, he would be drawing stuff, and he would be doodling, drawing. And then one day, FedEx came. When FedEx came, he picked up a package, a FedEx box, and on the box there was a drawing of Wolverine. And I asked, "What is this for?" "Oh, I draw for Marvel Comics. I'm sending this to Marvel so I can get paid for it." And I go, "Oh, okay. How do I get into comics?" He goes, "Oh, let me show you." And the guy who was working at the store, his name was Arthur Adams. I don't know if you guys know who Arthur Adams is.
No, no.
Done a lot of comic books. So I've been buying books from him before I started working in comics. And then from that point on,
Wait. Let's back up. What year was that?
this was, let's see, around 1990, 90s.
Okay.
Yeah, 1990s. Well, or maybe 1994, somewhere around that time. We used to hang out. We'd go to Great America together. I went to his place. He went to my place. Things like that. And then when I found out he worked in comics, I asked, "How do I get into comics?" "Oh, you just do samples and then just turn it in." How do I do samples? So I would be drawing stuff. I would be penciling stuff. After a while of penciling, Arthur said, "Why don't you try inking?" "What's inking? I don't know what inking is." He goes, "Oh, here, let me show you." He gave me samples of his pencils, the stuff that he was working on. And then I would take his samples, take his photocopies of his pencils, and start inking on top of that.
Okay, to back up a little bit again, I'm sorry. What were the pencils of? What were Arthur
It
Adams?
was it was a Generation X,
Ooh.
Gen 13 crossover. The
Oh, I
cover,
remember that. Okay,
yeah.
yeah.
And then he also did a lot of action figures for Toy Biz. So a lot of toy turnarounds of action figures like the Hulk, and like a lot of those stuff. And then covers, just a lot of covers that he was doing. And then I would take that and ink that on vellum.
Sounds fun.
Yeah. So on vellum, when I was doing the practice, I was practicing on vellum, and then when I was done, I would bring it back to Arthur and I would show it to him. And he was the only comic book professional I knew at the time. I didn't know how to approach talking to editors or going to conventions. I don't know any of that. I would just bring my art, new Comic Wednesdays, bring my samples to him, let him look at it. He would give me new samples, and then I would ink that up. And then after a while, I discovered conventions, and I would meet up with him at conventions. He would give me more samples of photocopies of his pencils. I would ink it up, and I would just show him. It was just a lot of back and forth between me and him.
So he was basically mentoring you. That's cool.
He was. He's a very nice guy. He was a very, very nice guy. So he would tell me what he would do differently, how he would approach through certain areas. And he was very nice. He never said, this is bad, you're doing this wrong. He would just tell me, this is good, or this is what I would do differently. So he was a very nice guy.
Very supportive.
Yeah, very supportive. And then after a while doing samples, I started going to conventions. And at the time I was working at a bank, Wells Fargo Bank. And then I said to myself, I don't think I want to work in the bank. If I can get work doing comic books. So I gave myself a year from doing samples to trying to get work. If I didn't get work, I would have approached working at a bank, being a bank manager or a district manager or something. But luckily, within a year, I got work from doing comics. And
who was the first one to hire you?
So the first work I've ever done was for DC. And the reason for that is because, DC and Marvel both at kind of the same year. I was at WonderCon in San Francisco, and I met Paul Smith. He was doing a tour with his Leave It to Chance comic book. He was promoting it.
Right.
And I saw him at a convention, and I would go to a convention with my portfolio. I asked Paul, can you look at my work? And this was he wasn't even at a booth. I just recognized him, and then he was walking in the hallways. I said, oh, Paul, can you look at my work? And he goes, sure. I opened up my portfolio. He looked at 3 or 4 pages. My portfolio had like 10 pages. He opened it, looked at it for a good maybe a minute or so, and he quickly closed it. Closing a book where, like a book slammed shut. So he closed it. I said, oh no, I'm devastated. I don't know what's going on. And he goes, follow me. So I followed him around WonderCon. I didn't know why he wanted me to follow him. I thought he was just wanting me to go to his booth or something. So I followed him, and what he was doing is he was introducing me to all the editors and artists that he knew.
Wow. What a sweet guy.
Yeah, Paul Smith. Yeah, he was walking around with my portfolio. He would walk up to an agency. He goes, you should hire this guy. Look at his work. He would walk up to another pencil. You should hire this guy. Look at his work. One person that was there at WonderCon was Bob Harris. He was the editor-in-chief for Marvel Comics at the time. He walked up to Bob Harris and said, Bob, you need to hire this guy. Look at his work. So Bob Harris looked at my work, and then he goes, oh, it's pretty good. Let me give you my card. And I gave him a sample. And then after that, I talked to Paul. Paul said, you should contact him back in a week. So I called Bob Harris back in a week from the business card that he gave me. And when I called him, at that moment, he was on the phone with Jason Liebig. Jason Liebig, he was one of the editors for the X-Men group. So they were talking about who they should get to ink a certain penciler. And then when I called, it just so happens that I was talking to Bob. And then Bob said, hey, we're thinking about getting an inker. Let me give you to Jason, who was in the same room. So that was my first work, was X-Force inking over Adam Polina.
Oh my gosh, I love Adam's work. That must have been a blast.
He's a great, great, great artist.
Yeah.
So I worked with him on that, also some X-Force Christmas thing.
That's cool.
A little bit later, a few months later, Paul contacted me and said, hey, Walden, I'm working on this trading card, Justice Society of America with DC Comics. Would you be interested in inking over me? And I said, sure, I would love to. So he sent me the actual pencils to Justice Society of America for a trading card. It was about the size of 8.5 by 11, half the size of the original comic book page. And then Paul said, I want you to ink this with a brush. And at the time, I did not know how to use a brush. I was only using nibs. That's why I learned how to ink, just using nibs. Paul said, I want you to use a brush. Okay, how do I use a brush? I don't even have any brushes. Paul goes, go to our store, buy a brush, and let me show you how to ink this. And this was before the internet, before there was internet, and I don't even think there was email at the time. This was a while back. So we worked with each other through faxing each other. I would ink a certain area. I would fax that piece to Paul. Paul looked at it. No, this is wrong. This is how you should do it. And Paul would ink that same character, and he would fax it back to me. So we will be faxing each other our work back and forth. By the time Paul was done, he inked the whole trading card. Paul, why are you even wanting me to ink this piece for? I mean, why do you even want me to ink this piece? You pretty much inked the whole thing yourself. He goes, yeah, but I still want you to learn how to do it. I want you to learn how to use a brush. And I go, yeah, but you're practically done with the whole card. Just turn it in, you get paid for it. And then Paul, which I'll never forget, Paul said, yeah, I want you to get credit. And then if you ever make it like in the industry, I want you to do what I'm doing for you. Like kind of like how he helped me along the way. So now I do this YouTube thing to help others along the way. Because what Paul did for me was we worked with each other through a fax machine, and he taught me and he kind of trained me in a way. And then now I'm trying to do what he did for me. So that's why I do the YouTube channel. And then my first DC work was a few months after that. I didn't know this at the time. The project I was working on was JLA, Justice League of America. I was the regular fill-in inker over Mark Parrillo. And we were the regular fill-in team that took over Harvard Porter and John Dell. So whenever they needed a break, we would just go in there and do the fill-in work. And it was great. It was working on all the iconic characters, Wonder Woman, Batman, Superman. But it was one of my first projects, and I thought, every comic book project is like this. It's pretty cool. But now thinking back now, I didn't enjoy the moment as I do now, because it was all 7 of the major DC characters. It was very nice working.
And you were probably scared to death too. I mean, if I started, early on like that, and they gave me the Justice League, I'd probably be a little intimidated.
I didn't know Justice League was. I mean, compared to other books, it was just a project. Like I didn't think about it's like Justice League, all the major characters. So that was. I was more concerned about doing the work right and on time than knowing that it was all those characters. So I was very lucky. I mean, when I started out working for the X-Men office, and then working for the X-Men office at Marvel, and then working for Justice League over at DC at the same time. So I was very lucky at the time.
So on the subject of mentoring, if you guys, I know there's a lot of aspiring comic book artists here, and if you guys want to follow Walden's channel, the link is in the description there.
Yeah, definitely follow Walden. And Walden, you have probably a year on me as far as this YouTube thing, but that's kind of what I'm doing here too. I'm trying to pay it forward, and there have been a lot of people in my past that have taken time and gave me suggestions and helped groom me to become a better artist. So it's good to hear that that's what you're doing too with the YouTube channel.
Yeah, see, I think Art Thibert is. I call him the godfather of inking, because a lot of inkers these days, they're using techniques that was originated from Art Thibert, like certain rendering techniques, inking techniques, using Post-it notes, using certain things. I've learned it from elsewhere, but they would tell me that they learned it from you. So basically, I've learned a lot from you, and I study your work along the way. So you having me be on your channel is quite an honor.
Oh, well, thank you.
Would you like to be on my channel? I was like, oh, really? Are you? Maybe I actually made it into the business. If Art asked me to
No. I mean, you are amazing talent. We actually worked together. Do you remember that? Well, you inked me before.
Was it Superman?
It was a DC character. I'm going to put you on the spot.
DC character. I can't remember.
He may have wings.
Hawkman?
Yeah. It was a little. I think I was helping out. I think it was like 10 or 12 pages.
Yeah.
And the Atom was in the story as well.
Oh yeah.
And you inked me, and man, I'll tell you. Part of what we do as inkers is we have to be versatile. So we have to be able to change up styles. And I don't know how, but man, you nailed it. It was like you knew exactly what I was going for with the pencils, and you stayed close to that. And then I think a good inker is always able to bring a little bit of themselves into it as well. They follow the style, but they also are able to bring a little bit of themselves. And you did, and it's still one of my favorite jobs. So thank you for hooking me up.
Oh, you're very kind, Art. Thank you. so much. Yeah. So when I'm inking, I like, even before I approach doing the work, I like to study some of the previous work that the pencilers work with, some of the other inkers. And then when I get a chance, I would like to talk to the pencilers and see what direction they like their inks to be. So I pride myself on being able to adapt to different styles. So that's one of the things that I'm really happy about. I think with that, it's as long as you're not taking over the pencils and making it something else and making it your own, I think that's not really good. But if you're able to make each penciler's work shine and then just make it look better, it's all the better. And
Yeah.
I've studied your
Oh,
work
go
a
ahead.
lot. Even like I was buying books that you worked on, like Cable. That was one of my favorite books.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, you worked on, and I've been looking at your work even before you were doing inking like full time. When you were doing penciling. Yeah.
Cool. So would you say one of the main things about being an inker is, I mean, you have to be fast as well, but you
Yeah.
think it's just understanding styles, right? I mean,
Yes.
just studying all the different styles in the industry, and then I find it best too. Like even when I'm not working on that specific person, that I just kind of always keep my eye out on all the new talent and everybody that's coming up, and I study them. I just open the comics and I just look and I say, well, how would I ink that? How did he ink?
Yes.
And one of the things that I always tried to be is a bit of a chameleon, because I like rock and roll, and I always thought like David Bowie was pretty cool, how he invented himself and reinvented himself, you know, every couple years. And so I always try to do that. I always try to, you know, bring and be influenced what's happening now, as well as things in the past, but mostly things that are happening now, and then to try to incorporate those, you know, in the work. So I think if you can do that, then you're always going to stay somewhat relevant and contemporary.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really important that you stay up to date with a lot of stuff. Like even it's not even just inking. I also do watercolors. I also do painting. I teach at the Academy of Art University, and then when I go there, I would meet students that would tell me what they're into, like what kind of inking style, what kind of drawing style, what kind of characters. So that keeps me up to date with what's going on. Otherwise, being an artist, you're just behind a room with four walls, and you don't really talk to people. You don't really know what's really happening. It's good to keep up to date. Like sometimes when I'm traveling around and then I'm not really on the drawing board, I will look at the sky, or I will look at the floor, or like the foliage grass, and I would think to myself, how would I draw that? How would I ink that? How would I approach giving that texture? So that it's really important to keep thinking artwork wise, just to keep evolving as an artist.
Yeah, I remember when I was working with Danny Mickey, I brought Danny Mickey into the fold, so you can blame me for his career. And I used to say like these things, and I was just kind of goofing around, but it would always sound like deep. Like, when you're inking a rock, become the rock. When you're inking a piece of steel, become the steel. When you're inking grass, you know, like so the idea is like what you were saying, that you think about those textures, even though you're still using ink, you're using the same tools. If you can think about them as a different entity, so it's like cloth, there's different types of cloth. So even when you're inking those things, you go, oh, this is wool, or this is cotton, or this is a thicker material, this is a thinner material, you know, blades of grass, you know, tree textures, what kind of tree, they all have different types of textures and stuff. And I think you're right that you can learn from opening the comic books, but you can also learn, well, you can learn a lot more by just life itself.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times when I'm making, I'm also, like you said, if you're inking a rock, become a rock. I find myself making special effects with my mouth. Like if I was inking a certain area and if someone's throwing a rock or someone's running by, I would go or, you know, I would just make certain noises and I would just think certain things. And that's normal. It's just being part of an artist.
It's getting into the mindset. It's getting into the mindset so that you can do those things. And sometimes it's so subtle, like, you know, maybe most people wouldn't really recognize the difference between the way you inked, you know, a car versus the way you inked a tree. But there is a subtlety, and like, you know, a professional usually can see that. They go, oh man, you know, on this one, Walden became the tree, you know. Like,
Yeah, so it's a lot of practice. I mean, when I first started working, I was basically tracing. Like I didn't know what inking was. The more I've been doing this inking thing, the more I understand it. You're not just tracing; you're also thinking about textures, how to apply certain textures, how to separate foreground, middle ground, background. What lines to make thicker, what lines to go thinner, when to break the line, when to make the line flat. It's a lot of things that you're thinking of, not just tracing. You can just use like one tip and just trace it, but that's not gonna create the artwork. That's not gonna create depth. Us being inkers, we have to create more depth into the pencil that was there originally.
Oh, I totally agree because it the only thing that anybody's really going to see is the inks. So if you can't plus the pencils, then you're not really doing your job. You know,
Yeah.
if you can't make those pencils uh, pop from the page, then you're not really doing your job. And I think all good inkers, you know, when you were saying about sounds when you're inking. I kind of think the same thing. Like every line should move. Every line has meaning. So every time I put a line down, I think like this has got to move. This has got to look like it's moving fast. Like if there's an arm coming at you, like he's punching, I try to think like, okay, this arm's moving faster. So even when I ink it, I might work quicker than I would something, you know, something else. So I can get that kind of energy in there and I can get that attitude. And so it can, you know, like I said, in a subtle way, I think it comes across. I think maybe people don't see the subtleties of what we do, but as long as that feeling comes through, you know what I mean? Like they're like, man, he's really moving fast, or you know, that's a really stagnant object, or whatever it is that we're doing.
Yeah. Uh, being an artist, you just have to, like every line you put down has to be a reason that is there. Being an artist, like every line has to have a reason. Every line has to have a beginning and an end. You can't just finish a line, just scribble in the line. Being a penciler, you can just like draw whatever layout, whatever. But when you're inking, every line has to be there. Lines that you ink quickly, lines that you ink slowly. When we're inkers, when we're working, there's you can ink fast lines, you can ink slow lines. To the regular viewer, they don't see the difference between a slow line and a fast line. When I say inking a fast line, when I'm inking, I'm sure as well as you are, that I look at where the point starts and I look at the destination, and then I don't really look at the tip of the pen going from here to here.
You look at the
here,
end.
and I look there and I draw the line.
Yes.
Yeah, so because my hand will automatically go where I want the pin to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot
and
of
after a while you do it, you don't even think about it anymore.
Yeah.
You just kind of do it organically, naturally.
Yeah, that way you can get a much smoother, quicker line. And then I use my arm a lot, it's kind of like a compass. I'll use my wrist or my elbow or my finger. That way you can get a smoother line.
Yeah. Do you pull away from you or do you drag towards?
I ink away from my body.
Okay. Yeah.
How about you?
I think most people do that. They ink away. Like I know Scott Williams inks away, like left to right because he's right-handed.
Yeah.
I think the only ones I know of for sure is like Danny, Mickey, and myself. We ink towards. Like we pull. I can do both. Like when I would ink Dave Finch, I remember on Ultimate X-Men, I pulled away a lot just because it had more of an organic and it had a little bit more movement to it. But for some reason, I'm a lot more comfortable dragging it towards me. And like Danny will point out, inking the way you ink is better on your hand because you'll cramp up a lot when you drag towards you. It's like your hand is kind of not in a it's more in a tense position. So when you're kind of moving things towards you, your hand is kind of more cramped up. So I always admire people like you and Scott that can kind of move it. They can move away from them because the reason I don't like it is because for me, I can't see the destination.
Yes.
Because your hand's hiding the destination. So I like coming towards me because I can see the beginning, middle, and end of it.
Yeah, that's very true. I was just going to talk about that. Like a lot of, when I ink away, sometimes I can't see the line that I'm inking. So I'm reaching over. I'm looking over just so I can see the line. But when you're inking towards you, you can see the line that you're inking right in front of you.
Yeah.
So when you ink, do you spin the page? You mentioned that you can ink away and towards.
Yeah.
Do you spin the page? Because when I make it, I'm constantly spinning the page. Like
Oh,
That's
yeah.
funny. You
pottery.
guys both do that.
Huh?
So that's funny that you guys both do that.
Yeah, it's constantly spinning, 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 spinning when I'm
Because
working.
you have to get your hand into the right position. So sometimes it's really awkward to get your hand in that position. So you have to kind of turn the page to get into the position that your hand is going to move, because we are still, you know, because your hand is connected to your forearm, so you can't really move it in a you know, you can't move it all the way around. So you have to kind of move the page to accommodate the position that your arm and your hand are in. Yeah, so I do that too. Yeah.
Yeah. So it just works better that way, moving your hand. And then when you're doing that, does your left hand get tired?
Sometimes, yeah, it depends on how fast I'm moving, because you're kind of holding it, like you said, like with your fingertips, and you're just kind of moving it around. But the other thing I noticed is I'm sure you have as well, that we're doing a lot more videos. So the thing is, it must really, people hate it because we're spinning the pages around while we're filming.
Yes.
So they're probably getting some kind of vertigo. Yeah.
I'm getting vertigo. I'm getting these videos.
Now, can you guys see, like in other inkers' work, can you tell whether they're inking towards themselves or away? Like, do you guys pick up on those things?
Looking at the art, I can't tell.
I can't either. Yeah, because there's some people too, and I can do it both ways. I'm sure you can as well, Walden. It's sometimes like I'll go from the tip to the thick, and then sometimes I'll pull out from the thick to the thin.
Yeah.
So it just depends on what I want it to, want it to be.
Yeah, yeah. I remember the first time I've learned that was it was also the same time when I met Paul at WonderCon. I was talking to Terry Moore of Strangers in Paradise, and I asked him, when you're inking lines, do you go from thick to thin, or do you go from thin to thick? And then he said to me, to be a good artist, you should be able to go both ways, thick to thin and thin to thick. And I didn't quite understand that. I couldn't do it for the longest time. But now that I can understand how that saves time and how that's more efficient. Because
also, like we were talking about spinning the page, if you can do it both ways, you don't have to move the page around as much. That's right. The economy of movement is better. And also there's lines, like those kind of blunted, like, what's his name? Terry Austin lines.
Yes.
I can only do those when I kind of go from the end to the black. So where I go from the open area into the black, because then you get a nice blunted line.
And that's with quill.
Yeah. And with the brush, I can go from thick to thin out at like a pull out, and then I can go from tip to thick. And strangely, I prefer, and I'm going to ask you the same question.
Okay.
I prefer with a brush, going, it's going to sound really strange. I prefer going from the tip to the dark. How do you?
Same way.
Yeah.
And then, the way I explain it, it's just like landing a plane. If you can land your plane softly, go from thin to thick, that's the perfect way to do it. Yeah, for some reason the rhythm, I can get into the rhythm better, and quicker. Yeah, it's quicker, and you can kind of get that flow better. And I must admit, or I must say to all like people that may be new inkers that are coming in and listening to this, this is a skill that takes a lot of work to be able to do, though. It's much easier going from thick to thin, but I'll tell you the key. The key is always that first line you do, think of it as a throwaway, and always go exceptionally thin. Like I'll build like a progression from thin to thick, but also, how sometimes they'll go from like thinner hatches to thicker hatches in a progression. So they don't just go from like tip to, into the black, but there's also a progression that goes down. And so what I'll do is I'll just give myself, I'll just say, this is going to be a throwaway line, so it's going to stink. And so, but if it's really, really thin, nobody will know. So then I go really, really thin, because it's easier to go from thin to thick than if that first line is really, really thick, because then you're kind of stuck and you're locked into that progression based on that first line. So when you put down that first line, always go really, really thin with it. Yes. And another thing with that, if you're using a brush, if you're going thick to thin, sometimes, I don't know if this happens to you, Art, like sometimes your quill will catch some of the fiber and you're not going to get that tip, that fine line. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. I definitely know.
Yeah. So, like, I think going from thin to thick, there's more control because I can see the tip of the brush going into the paper, gliding onto the paper. When I'm going thick to thin, I can't really see the tip of the brush. I'm kind of like gambling that it's going to be a fine tip.
Yeah, but I'm talking about like when you know how like sometimes I mean we're talking about just a thick to thin pull out from the black, but you know how like there's a line progression, and so every one of those lines isn't exactly the same line weight.
Yeah.
So then like the top, like where the light is coming in, that line should always be really really thin. So that's the one I'm talking about as a throwaway line.
Oh,
So
I see.
that's really thin. And then as you move it down into, you know, because sometimes there's two blacks. Like there's a black, like let's just say, that's running up the side, and then there's a black that's on the bottom. So then you'll go from thin, like the thinnest line. They're all still pullouts, but one's thinner, and then they get thicker in the progression as they go down into that other black. So that's what I'm talking about. Like that first line, always think about it as kind of a throwaway, and always go super, super thin with that entire line. Because then if you go too thick, then you're locked into that as a progression. You know what I mean? Because your next line has to be thicker than that one, and so on and so on and so on. And then you can create a muddy batch of hatching if you don't do it that way.
Yeah. So here's the other thing with inking. Like when I use a quill, I can go. When you're using it, you know, like this way, you can ink a really fine tip. But did you know that if you use the quill sideways, you can get an even finer line?
Oh, I do that all the time.
Do that all the time?
Yeah. So that's a good bit of advice for people, for new inkers, because you can turn that nib to get a specific line out of it.
Yeah, you can ink with the nib. You can do fine line, thick line, medium line. Sometimes, if I want a really fine line, I'll just ink 2 lines and I'll fill it in later.
Yeah,
really thick line.
Hey, when you're inking with the brush, what size brush do you use?
The brush I use, and everyone always asks me what brush I use, is a Pentel Aguash watercolor brush pen.
Oh, I've seen you use that on your channel. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a plastic. It's a plastic. I call it a disposable brush because once it falls apart, I just throw it away and I don't have to worry about cleaning it. And I don't really even clean that brush. So that they make that in 3 sizes: the fine, medium, and the thicker one. I use the thin one because if you're inking, why do you even need a thick brush unless you're using it to fill in the blacks? Just use a thin brush and then just draw 2 lines and fill in the rest.
Well, also, if you have a cartridge, then you don't like a thin brush. The reason a lot of inkers don't use it is because they don't hold a lot of ink.
That's true.
So if you have a cartridge, then you can use a really thin brush because it's always going to be loaded. You know, it's always going to be perfectly loaded with ink.
Yes. So I dip the brush. Like even that.
Oh, you're still dipping it? You're not using the cartridge? Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that Aguash, that brush pen, you can fill it with ink, and I've done that before. But when I fill it with ink, the ink sometimes flows out too quickly.
Oh, okay.
Like when I'm inking small, fine details, I don't want the ink to flow out that quick. So when I dip it, so here's another thing. Okay, Art, when you're inking and using a quill, do you dip your quill or do you feed it?
Feeding it, I don't know. It takes too much thought, and you're gonna get ink all over you. I just dip it in, and the key that I think for that is that only put as much ink in the well that just goes a little bit past that little open area on your nib, and then you're always going to be perfectly filled. And then what I do too is I'll just kind of lightly, like, flick it with my wrist and just flick off the little extra, and then go into my line. Yeah.
Yeah. So the first time I met you, Art, it was San Diego Comic-Con. And then I was walking around the artist alley, and I saw you. That's Art Thibert. Should I talk to him? I'm so scared. You know,
I'm nervous.
Yeah. So I walked up to you, and then I showed you my samples. I don't know if you remember because you probably see a lot of people. And then you asked me, do you dip your brush? And I said, I don't. I feed it. And then the first thing you did was look at me wide-eyed, and you said, are you bleeping crazy? Yeah. Yeah, so even today, I've been dipping. I thought, because the first bottle of ink I bought was a Higgins Black Magic. It comes with a little dropper. So I thought that you're supposed to feed your quill. That's what I thought. And I've gotten so used to feeding my nib that I still do today. And then I know what you mean when you're filling the ink well, like just enough ink where you're dipping it. You're not over dipping it. Well, but when I feed it, I like the quill to be clean on the back, the concave side.
Oh, okay.
The side is with ink. So this way I don't really need to clean the top that much. Because the top of the quill, after a while, it starts drying up, and then you're gonna get a thicker line. Right?
I always get the collection in the open area on the bottom, though. I never get the top is always clean though.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So when I'm dipping, when I'm feeding, I just feed the bottom part, the bottom of the round part.
Right.
Yeah, the top stays clean all the time.
I think for me, the reason I like it, and I have a glass. It's not what the original ink or the ink I use comes in, but I have a glass ink well, and so what I do is it's just so I don't have to think about it. It's more like thinking, and less just kind of. It's just like one step I don't have to think about. So if I just go over to the right and I dip it in, when I hear that little metal hit the glass, it makes that little ding sound. And so then I always know it hits the bottom. You can also feel it, but I like the glass because it'll give me that little sound too.
Wide mouth glass bottle then.
Exactly. Yeah. But it's still an inkwell, but I think it was like an FW. You know how they have the wider mouth and their glass? Yeah. I think it's one of the like FW inkwells, and I just keep that. And then also if I have the glass, I can clean it because I don't know, this is probably good for a lot of inkers to know too, is that ink, even though you add new ink to it constantly, it will coagulate, it'll thicken up. And so what you should do every once in a while, I don't know, every couple months or whatever, as a mandatory thing, go and don't dump it out in the sink though, because you're going to clog your sink, but just find something and dump it in. And then just clean it out in the sink, and you'll find that there's like all kinds of crusty, like boogery things on the bottom of you.
It feels like you had a bloody nose in that quag.
Exactly.
Yeah, I remember when I first started inking, I was talking to all
ink
these,
boogers. They're ink boogers.
Ink boogers. Ink snot.
Ink snot.
I remember when I first started inking, I was talking to all these inkers like Jonathan Sabal, D-Tron, Danny Mickey. They were telling me they have an inking formula. They use a 1/3 of this bottle of ink and then 1/2 of that bottle of ink or whatever to mix the inks because they like mixing the inks. So I thought maybe I should try mixing inks. So I had I had two 32 ounces of bottles of ink. One from Colonial Repeatograph and the other one was a Black Magic. So it was half bottles left. So I decided to, throw one bottle away, pour it all together. When I poured them both together, a week later, the whole bottle of ink coagulated like Jello.
Yeah.
Couldn't use it anymore.
Well, the Rapidograph ink, the reason they use that, because the Extreme Studios guys, like John, I was like kind of early on, like working with him when he first broke in the business. And I think like, who was it? Like Danny Mickey, those guys started experimenting with mixing the inks, and the Rapidograph ink, what it does is it makes for beautiful originals because it has like that acrylic in there, so it becomes kind of thicker and shiny.
That's right.
Yeah, so the originals look really nice, but the thing is, I'm like you, Walden, where it gets a little too thick, and it's weird. It's thick, but it also takes longer to dry. Like if you use Higgins dries pretty quick, but that the Rapidograph ink, it stays more like I don't know.
It takes a bit longer to dry.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's another thing. When I'm inking, I'm going to ask you this question. When you're inking, do you ink one page at a time, or do you rotate between 3 pages? Well, I rotate between 3 pages because sometimes I'm applying the ink, and while I'm waiting for it to dry, I'm rotating it to another page.
Yeah. If I have multiple pages, But on Super Sons, you've worked with Carlo.
Yeah.
They'll just trickle in, so you usually don't get multiple pages at one time. So, but what I'll do is if I just have one page, I'll do the same idea, but I'll bounce around on the page. So like from top, I'll ink a little bit there, and then I'll go to the bottom while the top's drying, and so on and so on. And I'll kind of pick and choose wherever that wet ink, I'll stay away from it and ink another area.
Yeah. And do you use different inks for different tools? Because I use different inks for different tools.
No, I've been doing this so long, I've just kind of gotten past. It just seems like a hassle, so I just go with the lowest maintenance tools that I can.
Yeah.
So I use the 102, and then I use a Winsor Newton Series 7 watercolor brush. I usually use a number 2, and then I'll just use Pelikan ink straight out of the bottle. And I find Pelikan the best overall ink as far as low maintenance, because it stays good for a long time. Because, the bottle's open for 8-10 hours a day. So your ink starts drying out. So it stays the best.
You keep your bottles open?
Well, I mean, when I'm inking, yeah. But I mean, when I'm not, of course I close them.
I close up my bottle after each dip.
Oh, God.
No kidding. No kidding.
How do you get anything done? You're like applying the pin with the
I'm
dipper?
opening up the bottle with my right hand. I'm dipping, and then I don't screw it in. I just place the cap on top.
And I know why you do that, because I'll tell you, I remember having a conversation with Scott Williams, and I think Joe Rubenstein might have been part of this conversation. But inkers are kind of like baseball players. Like, they get very superstitious. Like, they get weird about, like, oh, the dust is collecting on the paper, or the paper is weird, or the humidity, or it's really cold today. Yeah, so you start like taking in all these weird factors, and one of the things is like the reason I try to close up the bottle as much as I can. I don't do it like you, but things can drop in there, so you get like dust and you get stuff, and also it does dry up. So if you can kind of keep it in that pristine state as much as possible, then it's always going to work at its optimal best, Yeah. So I understand exactly what you're talking about.
The chat would like to know, you guys, when it comes to, because I know you guys both pencil and ink, do you guys find it easier or more enjoyable to draw characters or backgrounds?
When I'm working, I do all the backgrounds first. Just because backgrounds, I'm coasting. Like coasting as in I don't really need to worry about feathering or line weights. Backgrounds, I'm just thinking about which lines to be thicker and which lines to be thinner.
You use it as a warm up. You're like warming up.
Yeah, and then usually the backgrounds are the most work for me. Like, so I try to get that out of the way before I do the figure work, because figure work is the fun part and that's the easiest part for me. So I try to do all the hardest stuff first.
No, I hear you. Yeah. I'll tell you what I do it the really easy way is I work with Taylor, and so Taylor does all the background work.
Taylor does all the background.
But as far as like penciling art, what do you find? Because you pencil as well.
You mean if I like penciling or inking myself or other people?
Like when it comes to penciling, do you find backgrounds to be like more easy or enjoyable as opposed to character stuff?
When I'm penciling my own stuff, I find it all enjoyable because I penciled the background, so I have a specific thing in mind when I'm inking it. So a lot of times when I'm penciling my own work, I'm kind of penciling it like an inker would ink it. So I already have like real specifics in mind. So I think I like inking all that stuff, myself, backgrounds and the figure stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, I don't really do a lot of penciling. I do painting backgrounds where there's no characters, and that's enjoyable too. I think it's just art in general. It's not. I don't see it as the figure or the background. It's just drawing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I gotcha.
Are those prints in the background? Are those your pencils, or are you inking?
Oh no, all these are other people's pencils.
Okay.
Yeah, the chat really
right
wanted
here,
you to show them off.
My pencils and inks. Just one.
That's nice.
Yeah. So this Depo's, I drew it and then I inked it. But all these other ones, they're penciled by different people and I inked it. Here's Carlo, our friend Carlo, right over here.
Hey, Carlo, look at that.
Nice.
Kung Fu kick.
Here's Murat. Murat's right over here.
I like that
Ryan
one.
the Unicorn.
There's Philip Tan right over here.
Oh, I like Philip Tan.
So a lot of different people that I've worked with. And I think, I started, my first work was in 1996. So almost 22 years in the business. And I think I've been very lucky to be able to work with a lot of different artists and to be able to sustain work for so long.
Well, I think it's because you're really good and you're always striving to get better. So, you know.
Yeah, because even now, I still don't think. Remember earlier when we first started this video, I thought, oh, Art Thibert is contacting me to do this video. Maybe I made it into the business. Like even now, I still don't think that I'm like a pro like you, Art, or like Danny Mickey or Scott Williams. Those are like people that I admire. So I still think I'm like a newbie.
I don't know. I think of you as a mainstay guy now. I really think of like everything, all the work that I see you do, all the titles. Whenever I see your name on it, I always know that there's going to be a great high level of artistry involved.
That's very kind of you.
I think you've more than earned your your place and reputation.
Hey, Walden, you've earned your ink stripes. I salute you. Yeah. So I wanted to ask you too. This is part of the interview. I'm going to put you on the spot. I'm going to ask you two questions.
Sure.
Who is your favorite penciler to ink, and what is your favorite company to work for?
My favorite penciler to ink is Arthur Adams.
Ah.
Yeah, I've worked with Arthur Adams. Like that's like a full circle thing. Both the people that got me into the industry, Art Adams and Paul Smith, both of them, I've gone full circle, and I've worked with both Art and Paul Smith. Art, one day he called me and he said, "Hey Walden, do you have an exclusive with DC?" And I go, "No, I don't think DC offers exclusive." "Well, if not, would you like to ink me on 4 issues of the Hulk?" So that's how I met him. And then Paul, he was working on the Spirit. And then he called me. He goes, "Hey, Walden, would you like to ink me on the Spirit?" And I inked like maybe 5 issues over him. So like everything, there's a beginning and end. It just kind of completes stuff. So I was very happy to work with both Paul and Art. If Paul or Art contact me now, I would work with them right away. I would just drop whatever I'm working on just to work with them again.
Well, heck yeah, I would too.
Yeah, they're great artists. And then as for which company, all companies, I work with both Marvel, DC, also Dark Horse, Image, IDW, all the publishers. And for me, it's more the work that I enjoy, like the art that I'm working on. Characters are fun. I mean, I get excited over working with certain pencilers, different projects, different publishers. I get excited over that, but I never thought about which one is better. I don't really compare, because.
Well, let me ask you this way then:
yeah.
which one treats you better?
Which one? I would say whoever's paying me is the one that treats me better. So if I went to DC, they're paying me, then it's. I mean, there's things that are different. Like every publisher does things differently. So everything, it's like trying to pick your favorite kids. Can you pick your favorite kids? Like which?
Oh, easily. I can do that easily.
Oh, you can't do that?
Oh yeah. I only have one kid though.
I have two girls. I don't do favoritism, so it's kind of hard. But I do like working with, like, there isn't really any publisher that I dislike. I just like working with every publisher.
No, I'm not saying dislike. I'm just like, which one do you like more? Yeah, I'm not asking you to badmouth anybody.
I like them all equally. Like say for example, if there was a new publisher, let's say CrossGen, for example, like that just started up, and then I've never heard of any of the characters, but it's exciting at the time to be able to work for CrossGen, and like I would be all excited to do stuff for CrossGen. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, for me,
It's the excitement that I'm into.
right. It's
like
it could be the project, it could be the person you're working for, it could just be
Yeah.
the experience itself. Yeah, and also like with Marvel and DC or any other companies, they're all different. So it all depends on maybe even your editor or who's overseeing the projects and stuff like that, how good of an experience you're going to have.
That's true too. Like you can say one publisher is better, but then sometimes depending on the editor, depending on the penciler you're working with, depending on the team, it could fluctuate.
Yeah.
But I've been very fortunate to be everyone I work with. I've had a good time working with.
You know why, Walden? Because you're easy to get along with, and I'm not saying that to like kind of blow smoke. I mean, you're genuinely a nice guy. You're a giving guy. You're very generous. I mean, you're generous with your time just to come on this show. So I think you're easy to work with, and part of the thing is, especially as a support, as like an inker is more of a support of the team than like the writer or penciler. So I think you have to be available and you have to be open to working with people. You have to listen. You have to be easy to get along with, because there's just not a lot of room for a prima donna, on that level.
Yeah, that's very important. I think Paul said to me, Paul Smith, before I even started working in comics, he said, there's 3 things that you need to think about when you're working into business. You have to be very good at what you do. You have to be very fast, and people have to like you.
Yes.
I mean, you can get away with 2 of the 3, but if you have all 3, your career will last longer.
And you have all those things. You really do. So
you do too, Art.
I don't know about that. I can be pretty prima donna at times. I think when I was the worst is probably, I think in the probably mid 90s. And maybe the later 90s, because I think what was happening is I was inking a lot more, and I think it's because I wanted to pencil more. I wanted to express myself, but I didn't have a lot of time to pencil, on the side. So I think what I was doing is I was bringing those ideas into the pencilers I was working with. So if you look at like Art Adams, when I inked the Fantastic Four over him, it wasn't the way he penciled it, and it probably wasn't the way he wanted it to be inked, but I kind of had a vision, and that bloopy style and those kind of blunts and some of that stuff that actually J. Scott Campbell told me years later when I was working with him on what's his book? Oh my gosh,
Danger Girl?
Yeah, Danger Girl 7. He said, you know where Alex and I got that look from? And I go, no, where? He goes, I was a big fan of that Art Adams stuff that you inked over, Art on Fantastic Four. And I said, oh, well, that's very flattering. So I know Art probably didn't like what I was doing, but it did kind of influence some people. And then I remember when I was inking a lot of Jim Lee stuff and I was inking a lot of Will stuff, they were giving me breakdowns, so I was doing finishes. So that helped out a lot because I felt like I was being more fulfilled, like I was bringing my full spectrum of talents to the table. And then I think the last project that I really brought myself into in a heavy-handed way was when I inked Carlos Pacheco on X-Men when I came back to X-Men. And I knew what Carlos was to move on. So then he brought in Jose Marino, which gave him more, I think, what he ultimately wanted. But there's still people today that look back at that X-Men stuff and they go, wow, Carlos never looked that cool. So I don't know. It's a real gamble. And I think if you have the support of your editors and you have the support of your penciler, you can kind of deviate from maybe what they really want or what they think they want,
Yeah.
Devilish Boredom says, don't worry, Art. Everyone was a diva in the 90s.
Yeah, I think it was more like the frustration with that I wanted to pencil. So I think I was kind of bringing a lot of stuff into my inks that maybe I shouldn't have done just because of the frustration that I wanted to kind of express myself in a deeper way than just kind of going over some lines.
Yeah, for sure.
Man, Walden's kind of giving everybody vertigo here.
Oh, sorry. Yeah,
Just like spinning a page.
You guys talk amongst yourself. I'm gonna get the battery charger because I'm running low on battery.
Oh, okay. I mean, if you want to wrap it up, we can do that too, but I'm having a bunch of fun as long as you are.
No, it's up to you
We
guys.
can always get you back on here.
Right over there.
Okay.
I mean, I can still talk for a little bit. I only have a few more left. Uh-oh.
Okay, well, go plug it in.
Okay, I'll be right.
You can make it.
Okay.
Do it. Oh, look at this device because he's losing batteries. Walden's down. We lost him.
Aaron wants to know, Art, I guess while Walden's away. He wants to know if you know Richard Friend. He said he's a great inker.
You know what? Richard Friend is among my my good buddies in the ink community, and he's such a great guy, and he's a really generous guy with like knowledge and helping. I've done a couple panels at different conventions with him, and he's really, really helpful. And he's very articulate. We did a couple inker panels together. I think check this out, okay? It was at the Long Beach show, which is local con here. We had Richard Friend, we had Danny Mickey, we had Norm Rappin, and myself at a panel. And we were just talking and hanging out. And that guy is so articulate when it comes to inks and the technical aspects. He can explain anything in a way better way than I can, than most people as well. I talked to him also with like Jonathan Glapion and Norm and a couple other people about possibly doing, and I think I mentioned it to Walden too at that Texas show, that I'd like to maybe, if we could all get together, do some panels together, like maybe even some like workshops together, where people would come, and then we could maybe do like a basic, like here's the basics of inks, and then maybe do a hands-on workshop. So whatever we lay out, then maybe we can have some blue lines and start working with some people, maybe do a couple hours or whatever and work with some aspiring inkers as a way to kind of like what you're saying earlier, Walden, where we can give back to the community and maybe, train some new guys coming up, give them.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, the benefits of our knowledge.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I mean, when I was starting out, I mean, besides having Arthur Adam and Paul Smith with me, there wasn't really much resources. I mean, today with social media, you can reach any of the artists and just talk to them directly. But back then, you don't. Besides the comic book store, you don't really meet any comic book artists, and you don't know where to go, what to do. So having both our YouTube channels and showing other aspiring artists what to do, it helps them a lot. It helps them along the way.
And by the way, in the link here in the description is Walden's YouTube channel. And if you haven't checked it out, you have to. Really, really informative. I mean, Walden gets into nuances, man. I mean, he goes over everything in complete detail, and it's pretty amazing. If you haven't checked that out, you definitely should after this. Don't check out right now.
Yeah, don't leave yet.
Yeah, so my YouTube channel, Walden Wong Art, I usually do tutorials. I do tutorials and then talk about little minor detail things that not a lot of other artists will talk about. I started doing more kind of everything I do related to comic books, like not just tutorials. So I would do unboxing of comic copies, comparing comic books with original art, going to convention, meeting some of the convention promoters, and just talk about that. So if you're into comic books, especially comic book art, it's a nice channel to watch.
It's great stuff. Didn't you even do one where like you got a FedEx box that was all bashed up from like
it was
that was my favorite one.
It was a comp box, and then the FedEx package came. Usually,
I just watched that video.
Yeah, usually we'll get like banged up boxes, and that's okay because that's FedEx. But this package I got, it was all wet. Like I tried to open the pages, separate the pages. They were sticking to each other. They were cracking apart.
Oh my God!
I don't know how it got wet. I thought maybe because of the hurricanes in the East Coast, and that's how it got wet. But someone on YouTube commented commented that they used to work for FedEx, and people would wash the truck, so there would be puddles of water in the truck. So maybe that package was sitting on that puddle of water for a while. So that
Oh
makes
my
sense.
gosh. Yeah, it happens. I call it like trying to ink like it's a mountain range, because sometimes the box will accordion, so the inside pages are also bent up, and I'm like, it's like inking on a mountain range, because you're inking, not just on a flat plane, but you're also inking on like a slightly like vertical plane as well.
That's
Like when
funny.
you get a package that's all, well, the artwork's all bent up, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you do when you get a package when you get pages that's all wrinkled and curvy? What do you do?
Well, you just make the best of it, right? But the other thing is that, if they're bent pretty good, there's a pretty bad indent, like there's a crease in the page.
Yes.
So when you hit that with ink, it'll do various things. It's out of your control. So it'll splinter out.
Yeah.
So you have to be real careful.
Today, a lot of inkers, they work on blue lines, so we don't have to risk getting artwork that's bent out of shape, unless the penciler wants their artwork to be inked over the original pencils. So back then, I would get a lot of pages where it was bent because of FedEx, and I used to iron it with a clothes iron.
I heard about people being able to do that.
How do you do that?
So I would get a spray. I would spray some water onto the board, and then I would try to flatten it first, like put it in between a heavy pile of books. And when that didn't work, I would pull out an ironer. I would spray the back of the artwork, and I would actually iron it, and it got it flat.
Wow.
It worked. As long as you don't put the ironing thing like right on top for too long.
Well, you have to put cloth on top of the paper, right? You don't just iron right over the paper.
I put another piece of paper on top.
Okay.
So I'm ironing on top of that paper through the artboard. So
I would be so worried I would burn the page.
When I first started doing that, it was burning the page. I ironed on the back of the artwork.
Oh, man.
There's a nice, like, a pointed shape that's burned into the board.
Yeah.
That's a really cool effect.
Yeah, I like this. Well, we should wrap it up. Is there anything that you'd like to add, Walden?
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, thanks for having me on this show. It's quite an honor, Art, to have you ask me to be on your show. Yeah, you're still like a inking legend, inking god to me. So I think it's pretty awesome. Check me out on my YouTube channel. The channel is Walden Wong Art. Go there, like, share, subscribe to my channel. Like and ask your friends to subscribe to Art's channel, a very nice channel. And then we're going to continue growing from there. Oh, and Art, you need to talk about your project.
Oh, I wanted to ask you too. Yeah, I just remembered. Like, what are you working on right now? Like, what can they find? Where they can find you?
Like, well, 2 days ago, Captain America Annual came out. So look for me there in comic book stores. Also, What If Flash Thompson Became Spider-Man? I think it's coming out this week. No, this coming Wednesday. I'm working on Qui-Gon, Star Wars Qui-Gon right now.
Cool.
So I'm keeping busy.
That's awesome. Yeah, and thanks for bringing it up. But I'm going to let Taylor talk about the campaign.
Oh, cool. Right now we are at 15,584 raised by 282 backers. Thanks to everyone who's come and support the campaign. If you haven't yet, the link is in the description for our book, Black and White Remastered. And even if you haven't pledged, it does help support us by sharing it. So if you can share that link with a friend, somebody might be interested in that book. Liking and subscribing to the channel will also help as well. And we just reached our first push goal, which is to get Pamela, to one of the original creators of the book, Pamela Thibert, to sign copies of the book. And our next push goal is to get the book square bound. And that's at 20. So we're going to make the push for that next.
Yeah, we're going to upgrade the book. So it's a graphic novel, Walden. So instead of just a staple in it, I don't know how you feel about like graphic novels. To me, if they're just stapled like a 48-page book, it's not quite a graphic novel until it has the square bound on the spine. Yeah, so we're gonna square bound the spine once we reach the 20,000 stretch goal.
Is there
or push goal.
Hardcover version?
Excuse me?
Is there going to be a tier for the hardcover version?
We're just doing the 48-page at this point. Maybe if we really get crazy and exceed, then we'll talk about possibly doing a hardback. That's not a bad idea.
Definitely.
Yeah, for those of you who weren't around when Black and White came out, it still is a really good book. Art is now remastering it, redrawing some pages, recoloring some pages. So it's going to be something you've never seen before. So check that out. Really pledge. Check out the book. It's going to be a really good book.
You are too darn generous, Walden.
I was such a fan of Black and White when it first came out, and now when I found out that Art was going to redo Black and White, I thought he was redrawing it. I got so excited. I contacted him. So I'm very excited for this, Art. I hope it does really well for you.
Oh, thank you. I mean, when I first started this, I thought the remastering process was going to be just kind of cleaning up lines. But really what it's turned into is I am redrawing a bunch of stuff. And there's going to be a lot of new pages that are going to be added as well that didn't exist in the original run. So there is quite a lot of drawing and redrawing in this book. So
yes,
it's going to feel like a completely different book.
Yeah. Think of it this way. It's like an updated movie from a previous story.
Yes.
New actors,
exactly.
New scenes, new fresh take, new eyes. It's going to be really exciting.
Well, hey, thank you so much, Walden. And also, thanks for your generosity to come on this show. I was a little nervous because I'm not an interviewer, but you made this so easy. I mean, it was fun to talk to you.
This was fun. This is probably my most favorite interview I've ever done in any interviews that I've done. Talking to you, Art Thibert.
Oh my gosh!
I can't believe I'm talking to Art.
Hey, thank you so much, Walden. And check out Walden's YouTube channel. Like I said, it's in the link in the description. And go and check out his stuff. The guy is majorly talented. And what do you say? You have Captain America out right now. You have Flash Thompson.
There should be a what if Flash Thompson became Spider-Man, and then in a few months, Star Wars Qui-Gon.
Star Wars. That's gonna rock, man. I like those Marvel Star Wars books. Well, very cool, man. Well, I'm gonna let everybody go, and I'm gonna let you go, and then continued success. So great. Thanks everybody. Thanks for showing up. Thanks for coming out, and we'll see you later.
Talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.
Bye.